So this part 2 is multilingualism. So what is multilingualism? What is significant about multilingualism? Connection between knowledge, script, and linguistic. Significance of multilingualism in Indian knowledge system. Limitations of monolinguals. Advantage of multilingualism. Latest proof of mental health issue related to multilingualism. And social cohesion due to multilingual. These are the aspects which we will touch upon. There are many others which I expect a healthy discussion and dialogue to emerge after this. So what is multilingualism? It is the use of more than one language by an individual or a group of speakers. Roughly 40% of the world population use more than one language. Less than 10% or 10% are actually comfortable with more than one language in reading, writing, and speaking reasonably well. India has one of the largest population in the world who speak more than one language. We are a nation of polyglots. Polyglots means people who can speak more than one language. We also speak a lot. We are an extremely verbal society, which is very good. For example, there are no toilets in many houses, but those householders have one or two mobiles each. Okay. So this is also the reason why our culture had oral tradition. Oral tradition led to so much of speaking, and only people who don't speak are teachers and students in the class. Students in the class don't speak because teachers don't allow them to ask questions. And the teachers who were students before, they were prevented from asking questions by their teachers. Rest of the society speak a lot, argue a lot, which is very good. Okay. So that part we will change now. We will have some discussion and talking from teachers so that later in the class you can allow students to ask questions and discuss. Okay.
ಇಲ್ಲಿದ್ಯಾ ನನ್ನ ಬುಕ್ಸ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಇದಾವ ನಾನು ತಗೋಬೇಕಿತ್ತು
Please, no back channel talking.
ಅಷ್ಟೇ ಹಾಕಿರಲ್ವಾ
Kindly mute. Okay. Since we speak a lot and people who speak in multiple languages have an opportunity to speak even more. And therefore, if they write in more than one language or get influenced by multiple languages, this is a very interesting slide. Kannada has the highest number of Gnanapith Awards winners in India. These are currently the 8 of them. Of these 8, all of them won Gnanapith Award for Kannada literature. But of these 8, 4 of them have a mother tongue which is not Kannada. Dara Bendre, Masti Venkatesh Iyengar, Girish Karnad, and Gokak. These 4 mother tongue is Tamil and Marathi, and this is Konkani. Hardly surprised that they won such prestigious awards. And Anant Murthy was my neighbor earlier, and he was an English professor but got his Gnanapith in Kannada. Okay, so considering all this, the fact remains that multilingualism is a great enrichment. Because there are certain expressions of humans, which is part of knowledge system, which is very, very difficult to express in other language. For example, a beautiful word called prayaschit. What is the English equivalent for that? There is no good English equivalent for that. But it beautifully captures the human state of mind, what is required to do prayaschit. So people who have learned multiple languages have a significant advantage in understanding human expressions better. We will come to that little more. Okay. But this is not limited to just this alone. You see here. This sadhu is blind and can speak 22 languages. He is a scholar in both Sanskrit and Hindi, never used braille interface, even though he is blind. He has created his own university and made himself lifelong chancellor, which is a university which gives educational opportunities for only handicapped children in this historical place called Chitrakuta. It gives UG and PG education to youth with any of the 4 types of disabilities: blind, deaf, dumb, and some physical disability. He is the author of 80 books and is the 2023 Gnanpith Award. Okay. Remarkable. And speaking 22 languages is difficult but not impossible, because we'll see later how the languages are linked. Okay. I have many friends and colleagues who are so comfortable with 5 or 6. And I know few who can read, write, and give scholarly discourses in at least 4 languages. Okay. So we'll come to that. It's interesting. But this aspect is not limited to India. It is universal. All of you know R.K. Narayan, phenomenal writer. If only had proper backing, he would have got the Nobel Prize in Literature. But other than Gunther Grass, nobody else supported him, even though he was nominated. And R.K. Narayan, I met him because his grandson was my classmate. So we used to go to his house in Mysore. And his mother tongue is Tamil. Okay? He lived a considerable amount of time in Mysore, where language is Kannada, and he is famous for writing in English. Okay? Similarly, amazing socio-anthropologist, M.N. Srinivas. I had an opportunity to meet him after his retirement. He was emeritus professor uh, in this center by the side of Indian Institute of Science. Okay, so I met him. His mother tongue is Tamil. Okay? And one of the world's greatest statistician of all times. He was born in Karnataka, lived quite a lot of time in Andhra, graduated from Indian Statistical Institute, Calcutta, then went and did his PhD in England, came back, stayed as a director for Indian Statistical Institute, Calcutta. After retirement, went to America. He got all the world's greatest statistician, mother tongue Telugu, lived in Karnataka, lived considerable amount of time in West Bengal, but known for statistics and English. Okay. C.R. Rao. He died when he was 103 years in US last year. More famous, Bhimsen Joshi. The mother tongue is Kannada, but is world famous for rendering in multiple languages. Okay. So I think it's not being what the mother tongue is, it is being what other tongues you have. That's really the source of enrichment and gives you phenomenal power of expression, both writing and in speaking and also in thoughts. That's the linguism is definitely a asset. And not just here in India, world over it is this. Look at Rabindranath Tagore's Gitanjali. He got the Nobel Prize not because Gitanjali was written in English, but it's translated Bengali Gitanjali to English, for which the Nobel Prize was given. Because those days the rule was, if you have not published in English, you cannot be eligible for Nobel Prize. You can see how bad it was. And one of the world's greatest writing of all times is Tolstoy. Tolstoy's original language is Russian, but he became more famous only when people started reading his works in English. I don't know whether Tolstoy ever knew English, but unbelievable. Okay, one of the world's greatest and influence. In fact, Tolstoy influenced Gandhi to turn into Satyagraha model and experimented first in South Africa, where he created his ashram, called it Tolstoy Farm. Tolstoy was very, very influential because very powerful writing. And all of you know Lata Mangeshkar. She has probably sung in, I don't know, 40 different languages, some 26,000 songs. Unbelievable. Okay. And her mother tongue is Konkani. Okay. This many of you may not know, but is a writer as powerful as Tolstoy because he waited 40 years for Nobel Prize. Why he waited 40 years for Nobel Prizes? His original works were all in Spanish. Please, no back talking, no back channel talking. Mute and talk. Mute and talk. I don't mind. Please mute and talk. Don't disturb others. Gabriel Marquez, but I had a friend who was in Mexico those days, 1975, 77 types. The first thing he told when he came here was, what are you people reading? You must read Marquez. And those days it was only Spanish. And in fact, he got the Nobel Prize not because it was translated to English and made available, but Nobel Committee changed the rules. They changed the rules saying literature in any of these languages, not just English alone. So Marquez actually waited 40 years to get his Nobel Prize. Unbelievable. Very influential. So there is very little to doubt about the value of multilingualism. Okay. So why multilingualism? Critical mechanism to understand, communicate, and transact with others. Mostly this multilingualism came because of interaction between culture, knowledge system, and trade. After all, whether Marco Polo or Ibn Battuta traveled, they traveled through 50 different cultures and languages. So it's not impossible to understand ourselves. It is more difficult, also more valuable to understand others. Okay. So this is really what is called intercultural. What it means is language is a barrier that needs to be broken to understand others. After all are humans. Everybody has their own struggles and highs and lows. The beauty of life is to understand the different expressions of humanity. And one barrier to understand this is language. So one way to break the barrier is to learn another language. Okay. It enhances the knowledge system of everyone when interaction, assimilation, integration of diverse and richer thoughts and experience and perceptions happen That is the reason why translated works are very important, because it allows us to learn about others in our own language, because we may not be able to learn all the languages. Okay. For example, words like chutney, catamaran, or Oxford English Dictionary words now, they have been incorporated. It is not necessary that our own language has the best expression for human thought. I gave an expression, prayashchit, right? You can't get a better expression for this in other languages, because it captures a unique sense of state of mind, heart, when you do prayashchit. Okay. Human thoughts and emotions transcend language barriers and need to be bridged. Multiculturalism through multilingualism. I'm not saying that our culture is superior. Every culture has lot of good and not necessarily lot of good. But most cultures have adapted themselves to wonderful socio-geographic economic issues, right? Why do Eskimos wear fur, whereas we half the time don't have any clothes on our upper part of the body, particularly men? It is a geocultural aspect related to the geography and climate, which is best suited for that, right? So, when we want to understand others or other cultures, which also means I want to understand other expressions, I need to break the barrier of language. Look at two interesting examples. This is a board, danger, keep out. This is in Mandarin. This is in Tamil. The same thing is in Indonesian script. So this is a board in Indonesia where or even maybe Malaysia, where all the four languages are put in every public space, because all the four languages run concurrently. Same is here. Our Mysore junction, Hindi, Kannada, and you go to the railway station, you will find people talking all the three. Very common. So the multilingualism is also a reflection of the multiculturalism. That is why I'm saying India is a very rich country, because we have 14 national languages. We have between 400 and 600 other languages which don't have script. Which means, in my guess, about 650 different languages are spoken in Indian subcontinent even today, which is perhaps the total number of languages in the rest of the world. It is that rich. Okay. So I again repeat, script came much late. So till the script developed, languages developed abundantly. Then once the script came, the number of languages with script is very less. And I'm sure with now modern artificial intelligence, language translation, all that, they will perhaps kill all the languages. I won't be surprised. Even more interesting examples. We all know is a documented history that Chandragupta married Helena after he won over Seleucus Nicator, who was the Eastern Greek Empire head. I'm very sure they had no common language. How did they communicate? I'm sure they would have made efforts to learn each other's, or more likely she would have learned the language of Mauryan Empire, which was Pali or Prakrit. Okay. This is another interesting thing in Vidisha. It's a 2nd century, 230 AD something. The language is the Central Western Prakrit with a few Sanskritized spellings. The script is Brahmi script of the Shunga period. It was issued by Heliodorus, who was the Greek ambassador at Bactria, and he made donations and converted himself to a Vaishnavite. This is very close to Vidisha in Madhya Pradesh. So, very interesting things, people changing culture, changing sometimes religion, changing, so many dramatic things have happened with languages. Okay. What are the advantages and disadvantages of multilingualism? Let's look at the advantage. Ability to understand and interact different knowledge systems. This is a significant advantage. Social, cultural, and economic benefits. I mean, whom do you talk to? You talk to somebody who knows this. That's why you will see traders know multiple languages. I have in the place where I live, there are 3 shops. All 3 shops are run by Rajasthanis. I go to one particular shop because that 2 youngsters who run the shop have picked up Kannada so well. They speak as well as we do. And then when I interact with them, I found out that before they opened a shop here, they had opened a shop in Andhra Pradesh, and they are very fluent in Telugu also. Okay. So very interesting, interaction happens when you talk and you hear them in your language, their expressions outside and their experiences. Enhancing some expressions in our own language. Many words from other languages have come. For example, Kannada does have about 15-20% Sanskrit. Malayalam has about 40% Sanskrit words. Maybe Tamil has only 10. Telugu has about 15-20 Sanskrit words, which enhances the expression, which means all the expressions in our language may not be adequate to express all the things we want to in what happens in our mind and heart. Okay. Again, it is proven that health improves with language skills. Generally, people who speak multiple languages are shown to be more healthy. Today, it is a very big neurobiological research problem with very, very concrete evidence. I'll come to that by the end of this talk. Second, last one, truth can be better discerned in original language. I want to know what is true. Therefore, I want to find out who wrote it for the first time, in which language. Maybe what we hear is translation. For example, 80% of the Western knowledge we receive today is in English. And that 80% of the Western knowledge we receive in English was not created in English. It is a translated version in English. So in fact, I had a very interesting guide who learned French and German because he wanted to read the original scientist's work, which was in German and French, and he wanted to check what they actually meant and what is told to us, whether there is gap in that. So he made efforts to learn French and German on his own. So this is very interesting because it's unfortunate, but today one of the barriers for knowing Indian knowledge system correctly happens to be lack of Sanskrit, which is a great barrier, unfortunate. But we should do something about that so that Sanskrit cannot be the barrier to learn Indian knowledge system better. Okay. What are the disadvantages? Effort spent on multiple languages may not yield benefit. You spend time learning other languages and you are stuck wherever you are, you don't move out. Languages quickly, in younger age, it is easy to pick up language, and it is also easy to lose language skill if you are not using it. well or consistently. I had this problem. Class 11 and 12, parallelly, I learned German because I wanted to do German language just to avoid difficulties of Kannada and Hindi. But having learned, I can still read and write. I mean, I can read, I can't write well. I can hardly speak. That's because unless you use consistently and you actually, the language develops only when you use it in conversation. Okay. It doesn't happen. Okay. There were no Germans around to help us learn better. And at what cost do you spend more time to master one language or learn more languages? Do you want to be a scholar in one language or a utilitarian in many languages? This is a doubt everybody has. And today's online translations make it redundant to learn other languages. Very unfortunate, but it will be the case. All you need to know is one language in this world. All the knowledge in other expressions can come to you in English, not necessarily very good, but it will come, including vocal. So I was talking about medical advantage. There's an interesting link. It gets bilinguals cuts dementia. The link. More important, numerous scholarly articles, well researched, both from Europe and America, they all conclude bilingualism in speech allows for better cognition and lower incidence and degree of dementia. It is indeed a serious problem as USA and to a lesser extent Europe is monolingual. One of the largest percentage of population having dementia is US because US is monolingual. Sparingly in southern part of US, the migrants speak Spanish, but unlike Canada, Canada has two national languages, both English and French. Whereas in India, we have 14 national languages and another 400, 500 speaking languages. That's why you will find dementia happening to people who are highly educated in India. Slowly they get away from all languages except English. They are becoming like US people. Okay. Back to language issue. Question is, how did this language evolve? Any difference between spoken and written form of language? Is there one source for all languages? And specific to India, what can we say? Have other knowledge systems faced such issues? How did they evolve? Okay, these are the questions to ask. Few answers. Languages have been part of human evolution quite recent on time scale. Humans have evolved over million years. Languages are very recent. Script writing is exceedingly recent, almost yesterday. So for this, we need to understand different phases of human evolution to understand this. So let us go back in time. This is how people came out of Africa, as they call, as the theory out of Africa. And they all came here 70,000 years back. Okay. They have been coming, the first wave, second wave, third wave, all that. So little over 2 million years has taken place for humans to evolve from Neanderthal to all the way to Homo erectus now. And people migrated into new continent, North America and South America, as recent as 15,000 years back. So when they came across new things and new economic, geography, culture, different challenges to survive, they have evolved different expressions. Okay. Like animals, animals have very crude, very elementary, I won't say crude, very elementary sound making. The complex sound making, which is speech and music, also depends on the brain volume. So you can see here, Neanderthal coming to sapiens, Homo sapiens, Homo erectus, very large brain volume compared to our ancestors. So the brain volume has evolved and it is evolving. We may have bigger brains in the next few thousand years. Okay, maybe brain with internet connection, I don't know, at birth only. But this is really what it is. You see the language diversity, tremendous diversity in Africa, Asia, Southeast Asia, very little diversity in Europe, much less in Northern Europe, little in Central Asia, America, little in South America. But tremendous diversity of languages in Africa, and this is where much of human evolution started. Okay. So basically, the early brains, what is called the Neanderthals, and the anatomically modern humans, they are able to process a more complex language structure compared to our ancestors. So even the apes have sounds, and the elephants also talk to each other in grunts. We don't know what the meaning is, but they are able to communicate with their herd. But a more complex language directly is related to human evolution, particularly brain. For example, here you see the cognitive aspect of language is this. Less complex languages were handled. Changes in brain and cognition, increased social complexity, increased juvenile period. This is very important. Increased parenting behavior, teaching through input enhancement. For example, the moment people started settling down, which is about 10,000 years back, what happens to animals? As soon as animal is born, particularly you would have seen in Discovery Channel and National Geographic, as soon as an antelope gives birth to a baby antelope, within 5 or 6 minutes, it has to stand up and start moving. Otherwise, a leopard or cheetah will come and swallow it off. So survival made juvenile period very short. Unlike humans now, children are with us for 3 to 5 years before they are allowed to go out of the house. Increase parenting behavior. Parents spend a lot of time on children and teaching through input enhancement. Parents teach all that to children, make them repeat. Okay. So now they are able to handle far more complex languages. And that's the reason today the languages are highly evolved. Just take, for example, English, which we are using. The earliest English is about 200 BC, which had mostly Celtic origin. What remains from that period is continuous tensing, ing, beginning, closing. This ing comes from them. Okay. And the do periphrases. Did you write this? And some place names. Then between 0 and about 400 AD, Latin dominated because Romans had occupied northern part of Europe. So Latin influence. Then the German influence because this Anglo-Saxons dominated. Then the Viking invasion, Norwegian words came about. Then the Norman invasion, Anglo-Norman, Old French. Then because of Renaissance, mixing of languages, French, Latin, Greek and Italian. And because of colonization, words from Hindi, Persian, Arabic, Turkish, Malay, American, everything came back. So today what you see is modern English, which only is 200 years old. Shakespeare in English, 500 years old. Middle English, 1000 years old. Same. Almost all languages have gone through this. So can we map some of these? What influence Greeks had on other languages? What about Romans? What have Persians done on language? What about the Sanskrit, which we treat as a holy language? If we treat Sanskrit as a holy language, what about the Dravidian languages? What about numerous languages that have no script, like Kodava, Konkani, Sanketi language? Are languages imposed? How is the governance connected with language? So this is related to imposition. For example, you see here, court language was Persian for 700 years. And less than 10 people in New Delhi knew, I mean, old Delhi those days, knew Persian. As soon as Alauddin Khilji and others came, the court language changed to Persian. And only Persian interpreters could give you justice. And that's the reason why there was so much of injustice. Even worse, even in 1785, court language was Persian in Mysore kingdom. This is exactly what Tipu Sultan did. He changed the court language from Kannada to Persian. English was the court language and administrative language from 1825 till 1947, and it continues even today. So justice, matters of life and death sometimes have to be communicated in alien language. Puducherry, Diva Daman had French and Goa had Portuguese. China is facing a more serious problem regarding English because it had no base of English. We had a base of English for 150 years. China suddenly has to deal with the world in a modern technology which is all English dominated, including the economics, and they had no base. In fact, in China, the most paid employee, even today, is a high quality English teacher, not a software employee. So, what is now known is about 4500 BC, which is approximately 6700 years back, we had something like a mother language to all present languages. We call that Proto-Indo-European languages. It is an early form of Indo-European languages from which all these came. So you look at the Indo-Iranian language. That split into Iranian language and Indo-Aryan language. The Iranian language went into Eastern Iranian language, and then that split into Pashto and Avestan, which is Pashto is predominantly dominated in northwestern part of Afghanistan. The Indo-Aryan language evolved to Vedic Sanskrit, which was not much used, and that split into classical Sanskrit, which went into all the rituals and knowledge system, and a more practical form of Prakrit, from which all this Marathi, Sinhala, then Prakrit went to Magadhi. From Magadhi, Bengali, Bhojpuri, and Odia came. The Prakrit went to Central Indic region, from where all this Punjabi, Nepali, all the. Then went to Hindustani. Hindustani split to Hindi and Urdu. Hindi is a very recent language. Similarly here, Germanic went to West Germanic, Anglo-Frisian, Old English, Middle English, now English. And here it went to Hellenistic, Classical Greek, Greek. Similarly, Armenian, Albanian, very interesting this language. The Albanian language just stayed where it is, where it was about 3000 years back. Whereas all others evolved, changed, modified, etc., all that, okay? And because the Indo-Iranian languages are closely connected with the Balto-Slavic languages, there are a lot of words in Russian which are like Sanskrit, similar. Okay. So many of the languages are interconnected, and we will see that. See here. Proto-Indo-European languages has the word do for two. Somehow the, thou, do, is, zai, z, do in Baluchi, do in Persian, do in Kurdish. So, do. To also many of linguistics is a very interesting discipline, very challenging too. Okay. Look at Indo-European language. Sanskrit is Dvi, Serbian Dva, English 2, Sanskrit Tri, Serbian Tri, English 3. So very close because all have historical roots. Beginning fact that languages started developing, splitting and reinforcing, we have script is much less than language spoken. So with the same script, they have translated versions of the same information. This is in Sumerian region. It is the same one written in two different languages, but using the same script. For example, look at Telugu and Kannada. Script is very similar. Similarly, Telugu and Oriya, script is very similar, but meanings are different. This is even more interesting. In eastern Turkey, this is the place. You can see this place is this writing, the statement from King Xerxes between 516 and 485 BC, almost 3000 years old, written in Old Persian, Alamite, and Akkadian language, but using same script, cuneiform script, which means the same information is written in three different languages, even though the script is the same. Okay. Even in India, what are the scripts? Only two scripts, Dravidian and Devanagari. All North Indian languages use Devanagari script, even though the words are different, meanings are different, rendering it is different, but script is a severe limitation. This is interesting because please no back talk, no back channel talking, please. This is a famous stone called the Rosetta Stone, discovered in Egypt. And this was taken by French people when Napoleon captured Egypt. And it is now in British Museum. Multilingualism was a necessity in strong economic cultures. For example, Egyptians, other than Nile River Basin, they are also very famous for trade. And they had trade with West Asia, they had trade with Greece, they had trade with Sudan, they had trade with Western Africa, all that. And it was multicultural society. So every government information used to be written in three languages. One is ancient Greek, the other is the Demotic language, which is the language of Jesus Christ, and the Egyptian hieroglyphics. This is a symbolic language. These two are scripted language. So, and after 2000 years, knowing Greek language, knowing Demotic language, early Bibles were also written in this language. This Jean Francis was able to decipher, because all the information in three portions are same. He knew this language and this language. Based on that, he was able to decipher hieroglyphics. So till around 1799, 1800, 1820 actually, first time that they decoded hieroglyphics. And today the only large language which is not deciphered is the Indus script. Indus script, we don't know whether it's a scripting language or a symbolic language or a connection of both. It is still not deciphered. It's a very challenging linguistic problem. And this is a very interesting thing in Athens. It says library open from sunrise to noon, no book is to be taken out of the library. And you have to give an oath that when you use the library, you will not take the book out. Okay. Very interesting, because taking books out of the library is a very common phenomenon today. How did the languages spread all over? This languages spread because of trade. This is the ancient Silk Route, which is well documented. Before this, maybe for another 2,000 years before that, people were making trial and error to build the Silk Route, because traders like, for example, Columbus, and who had to go through unknown lands, all that. Okay, so people have been adventurous to try out, and even here, after trying out, you will have a routes that are built up. Okay. So let's say people in southern part of Kerala, what is Kerala today? I mean, they had to speak some East African language. They had to deal with people in Egypt, Arabia, Persia, Europe, all that. They had to deal with people in Indonesia and China. So in fact, southern part of Kerala was the best globalization example in the world 3,000 years back. At least 6 or 7 different languages were spoken there, and people needed interpreters to deal with them. And in fact, European and Egyptian and Central Asian, South West Asian traders would come here to deal with Chinese traders. They would exchange silk and other things, and they would also buy spices here and go. And this is the way the trade built up. A very interesting thing that happened, for example, in 133 AD, just after the collapse of the Mauryan Empire, just on the other side of the Hindu Kush mountain in present Afghanistan, this is a Greek script. Okay, probably they didn't have script, local script, so they used Greek script to mention something. Okay, so this is where it is. In this script, using Greek script at this point, on the inscription here at Raptak, which is just before Hindu Kush Pass, it mentions Indian cities and the idea of Hinduism in this period. It mentions Kausambi, Sri Kampa, Patliputra, and instead of Ayodhya, it mentions as Saketa, which was the other name for Ayodhya. And interestingly, this inscription was given as one of the evidences of Ayodhya in the Babri Masjid case. This was one of the evidences. Yeah. And Indian knowledge system is not, cannot be delinked from Sanskrit. And the various versions of where the Sanskrit originated, it definitely did not originate in the Indian subcontinent. It looks like it came from Central Asia and a kingdom called Mitanni, which had many of these Deva types, what we call Indra, Agni, all that. Those days, you must realize that Ramakrishna, Shiva came much later. The earlier Vedas don't have Ramakrishna, and it focuses more on natural gods like sun, moon, earth, wind, fire, all that. Okay. So these people in Mitanni appear to have, or even here, the southern part of the Caspian Sea, they have culture and narratives which actually mirror the Sanskrit, what we see as Sanskrit today. As I said, started with Vedic Sanskrit, only hymns and very musical. You also see this with the Parsis in the Zoroastrian temple, making very musical rendering of hymns. Prakrit, then all this Pali, Gandhari, Maharashtrian, Elu, Magadhi, then it came to Hindustani, Urdu, all this Haryani finally. Okay. Gujarati, Marwadi, and Romani. Okay, Indo-Aryan language. So it may have originated here, traveled along this thing. So the very interested Harvard University professor clearly says the Vedic texts were orally composed and transmitted without the use of script in an unbroken line of transmission from teacher to student that was formalized early on. This ensured an impeccable textual transmission superior to the classical texts of other cultures, which was all in script and writing. It is, in fact, something like a tape recording of the era 1500 to 500 BC, not just the actual words, but even the long lost musical accent, as in Old Greek or Japanese, has been preserved up to present. On the other hand, the Vedas have been written down only during the early second millennium, while some sections, such as collection of Upanishads, were perhaps written down in the middle. Okay? One of the earliest scripts we see in India is what is called the Brahmi script. There are two places in Karnataka. There are plenty of them all over India, up to Afghanistan. This is a place called Maski and Brahmagiri in southern central Karnataka, where the word Ashoka is mentioned on the stone slab. So writing seems to have getting more popular from then on. And you can see here the connection between Phoenician, that is what is today Israel, Syria, all that, and Brahmi script, which we use. So the fourth column is Phoenician and fifth column is Brahmi. Very close resembles the script. So script also is, and then this is the development of Brahmi script towards Devanagari. So the Hindi language, Devanagari script, finally developed around 10th or 11th century, about 1000 years old. And you can see from Indo-European languages, the Indo-Iranian spread, and the European languages like this. Common root. This is it. Proto-Indo-European languages. Today you have all these languages. And Sanskrit has influenced all this, all the Devanagari. And Baltic languages, Slavic languages, Dardic language, Indian, Iranian, Brythonian, God, all these. What is interesting is this: 22 scheduled languages predominantly use only two scripts, Devanagari and Sanskrit. And some are Urdu. So we have three, majorly Devanagari and Sanskrit, and in certain places Urdu is also used, which is a late addition. What is surprising and interesting is the Dravidian languages. Today we have Dravidian, Kannada, Telugu, Malayalam, and Tamil. There are a lot of languages in the tribal area, Chhattisgarh and Jharkhand and Orissa and even Bengal, which all uses local languages which are more closer to Dravidian than the dominant Devanagari here. And what is more interesting is one taluka in the western Afghanistan-Pakistan border, they use a language called Brahui, which is very similar to Tamil. It is still used. So one of the theories here, you can do this matching. This is genetic matching of traits with Central Asia, Sumerian civilization. So genetic anthropology and linguistics is a very powerful research topic today, very challenging also. It appears that about 10,000 years back, people here, south of Caspian Sea, who had a Proto-Dravidian language, migrated to Indus Valley, and about 4,000 years, 4,500, 5,000 years back, moved from Indus Valley to southern India. So there are a lot of excavation, other things going on. and it's also political and cultural conspiracy. I don't want to get into that. So here it is. We had a Proto-Dravidian. It split to South, Central, and North, and Proto-South split to Tamil, Malayalam, Irula, Kodagu, Kurumba, Toda, Koda, all this. Then South Dravidian split to Telugu, Gondi, all that, and this is the way it went. Plenty of language splitting. Of course, about 220 million people speak Dravidian languages, and about 1,000 million people speak Devanagari languages. So this is his Proto-Dravidian split to this. Then Tamil and Kannada, which split to Kannada and Kodagu, Tamil. Yeah. There are more refined, mature language models today, which are related to computer science and other things. So you have very good language analysis done. These are the finite language, regular language, deterministic context-free, non-deterministic context-free, unambiguous context-free, internally ambiguous context-free language, context-sensitive languages. Now here context-sensitive language, these are all the things that we speak. Context-free languages are programming languages. Okay. So today we have lot of things going on in what is called a large language model, Chat GPT, Google online translation. And what they do is they design converters, let's say from Hindi to English. They also design converters from English to Marathi. Now, if you do Hindi to English and English to Marathi, very easy for you to do Hindi to Marathi. You take this part here, put it. This is what is happening in Google and other places. Finally, they want to make a phone where you press a button, say, I am going to speak in English, and you press another button saying, I want the listener to listen in Russian. So whatever you speak in English, is that fellow hears it in Russian. He will press a button saying, I want Russian to English. Press that, he speaks in Russian, you hear in English. So this is the kind of thing that's happening today. You have online script translation. You also have online language translation, and these language models are becoming very, very efficient. Today in the Lok Sabha election, lot of fake things were done. And by next Lok Sabha election, everything will be fake, including the candidate. Okay. So some observations. 3-language formula is very useful. It would be interesting to have whosoever has mother tongue. Their mother tongue is either Dravidian or Devanagari. Second language must be English, because English is an economic language. It is not a, I mean, people with mother tongue English will say English is a beautiful language. English is not a beautiful language. English is an economic language. And the third language, you reverse it. Those who learn Dravidian as mother tongue can learn Devanagari as a third language. This will do very well. This will do very well. I have a very good experience with this, because my mother tongue is Kannada. My second language is English. My third language was Hindi. I have lived in Calcutta. I have lived in Mumbai, and I can comfortably move around anywhere in the country. I am comfortable to live anywhere. Of course, I enjoy speaking in Kannada because it is an emotional language to me. And I read a lot, because English helps me read all other things about the world. Okay. But suppose you want a fourth language. Fourth language, what is interesting is Spanish would be a good fourth language, simply because the next region which is not economically harnessed, I don't want to use the word exploitation, which is really what they do, is countries which have Spanish rule, particularly South America, or Russian. In another 10 years, Russia will start importing people, because their demography has gone so bad, they will have to import people. So it'll be very interesting to go and live in the largest country in the world if only you know the language. Same appears to Japanese. Japanese have started importing labor. They will start importing citizens after some time. Or any of the Slavic languages, which are also easy to learn because they are closely related to Sanskrit. But the northern part of Europe, Baltic states, you have to bear 6 months of bad winter, but it's one of the finest places to live on earth because they have one of the highest quality of life. So, if you want to learn a fourth language, these are the options. Benefits of language learning in youth. Bilingual students outperform monolingual students in forming scientific hypotheses, better cognition, better life skills, better test scores. In college, higher success in college, higher earnings, higher chance of employability. For example, lot of people from Goa are employed in